All right. So today I'm working on the C scripting stuff, and I mentioned last week that I'm not entirely sure where the next steps are, but thinking about it, there is one spot where there's just obvious need for just brute work. It's not research work really, but the uh, the C scripting right now relies on being able to parse a PE file when you're on Windows and being able to parse an ELF when you're on Linux. Now this stuff isn't even done. We'd have to do some tests to get this one working. And this one has way too much extra stuff that I don't actually need. I just copied all of my binary file stuff out of my code base to get this thing started. But all that's actually needed for this piece is a parser. Not even a total parser, a purpose-specific parser. Very simple parser should be possible here. So I think what we should do today is try to iterate towards having having this be like a single simple header and C file in the C scripting code repository. That seems like a good next step. I'll also mention today's already Friday, so if you've been following along, I said last week I might be streaming Thursdays and Fridays, but I changed it a little bit because I've been on a hot streak of some cool stuff with the RPG simulator that I've been doing off stream by myself. Just a lot of cool stuff started coming up, and I wanted some time to work through it in a different mode than what I can do. And so a little bit of stuff has to be. I have to talk a little bit about how to get us caught up when we do that project again. But the other thing that started coming up is more ways. There's a whole new direction um, of what I think we could do with C scripting, and I haven't started that part yet. But I've kind of since I got the idea of what this might look like, I started just cleaning up some surrounding issues and stuff. So it basically revolves around uh, improving what we can do with that asset viewer that I started a couple weeks ago. I think that bringing C scripting into a graphical environment is gonna be another level of exploration and exploration that I want to touch. I'm not sure what it's going to correlate with there exactly, but I have some ideas. Um, but in the meantime, uh, let's work on this. We're just gonna focus in on the C scripting example code and application. Okay. And you can see all this stuff here. Most of this cannot possibly be involved. All that actually needs to work for the example to work is that um, I need the ability to, where is this? Set, yeah, in symbol set define. Okay, so symbol set define gives us a before main function, which is going to do self image get section. And self image get section is living over here in the base layer, implemented once per operating system, and it's grabbing all of these files. So PE parse, and PE parse.cr are all being used. Everything else is already extra. So I'm gonna just start tidying up. I think in this case it'll be easy to tidy up with file pilot. These are all keepers. These are not. Okay, so that simplifies it down a lot immediately. Now, I kind of want to just start pulling this out into this base layer. Okay, so what if we didn't have this as a function and we just had it as thanks, Brett Marks, for the subscriptions. Appreciate it. By the way, how is... Yeah, it looks like... Okay, mic is still working. And so that's parse. We can get rid of that. And that now. Now we're just down to pe.h. Now pe.dos header. What do we do with that struct? We check if the size of it will fit. Okay, we can do some stuff. I think what I'll do is I'll leave all of this in place for now. Because the thing that sucks would be if I started to say, well, let's just copy the pieces of this that we need into here. The one thing that sucks about that is how often are you going to want several different pieces of your program, each going to be dependent on a few of these things, and then you're going to have them colliding with their names. Because you can't actually get to the data structure you want with your source code yet, you have to do this whole text file thing. I think having a text file for all the type definitions of the format, even if you're not using them all, is probably fine. All right, simplification. This is going to be called data. Match doesn't need to be pulled all the way up there. You can just figure out the match at this point. Still a result. Like that. Okay, so what this has to do is get the DOS header. Extract coff file off DOS header 0, coff file DOS header offset. Extract PE signature. Okay, so we're gonna say we need to have a DOS header. This isn't an object file. What if we, instead of doing all these steps, what if we just start with, what if we just go to cough header? We're gonna say, okay, to get to the cough header, it has to be the case that the DOS header was not 0. It has to be the case the DOS header cough file offset plus the size of the PE signature, so U32, less than or equal to data size. Then it has to be the case you have to read the PE signature. It has to be the case that this is the PE signature. Cough header. Cough header equals. Right, so then it has to be the case that this here is that. Really what we need is if that plus the size of a U32 plus the size of a cough header. Size of U32 plus size of P cough signet header cough total size. Cough header offset is going to be cough file offset plus size of U32. Get the cough header, this needs to be 0. This needs to be in the range. This needs to actually be the PE signature, and then we grab the cough header all in one go. Okay. Hey, young Lane. How's it going? So, let's see. That one block now figures out the offset past the cough header pointer. So now, if we've got a cough header, we should be able to get a section table offset and counter by going after cough header. Offset plus the optional header size. So that's the cough header. That's the optional header that comes after that. That gives us the section table offset, and the section count lives right there. And finally, if all of that fits inside the range, then we scan each section for a string match. Let's write this without... Yeah, let's write this without any additional calls in it. So section pointer... Okay. Key putter name.string for as long as sec putter equals key putter, or let's do this, for as long as sec putter does not equal 0 and sec putter less than sec name plus size of sec name, sec putter plus equals 1, key putter plus equals 1. Do if these are not equal, break and match 0, right? Now, if they match, then this section is the one you're looking for. Return the result. Sage, Ghost, I'm not sure how do I want to explain this. What we're I have a PE parser that is very meticulous about reporting errors, so that if you are using it to parse files that you're generating, for instance, you could use it as a tool for analysis. It's not 100% there yet, but I have one that I've been building that way since last year. This is a copy of that I am baking a little example down with. And so in this case, this parser is only ever used to read the image, not the file, but the image of a program, right? So once I've launched my program, the image of the program lives in my memory as a part of my process's memory space, right? And I'm only parsing that, which means the operating system has already verified that it's compliant, right? Like the operating system, if it's already up and running, then that's as compliant as I need it to be. It will then have, at very least, the stuff like the right headers and section tables, because otherwise the operating system couldn't have made the process in the first place. Does that make sense? So for this one, what I'm doing assumes that we are in that kind of situation where the image, it's already a verified image running a process. We are examining it as it's in flight. It doesn't get access to another program's memory space. It gets access to its own memory space. It's reading its own image. And it's not modifying it. It's just attempting to locate something within the memory. Basically, the image acts like a data structure that we can use to find The image of the running program is just some memory in my program. So I can say, give me that image by saying, give me the address to it. Every operating system has a way to say, give me the address where the image of this current program lives, right? You click on the exe, it loads the file for that exe into the memory space, and then you get a pointer, and that pointer is just containing the address of the image that just got loaded. And so it's an image of yourself, right? And the reason you want this is because it has section names, it has data structures in it that you can use to locate things at runtime that you don't otherwise know where they are. Marks, what Win32 call do you use to get the image? Yeah, so the Win32 calls involved here are, let's see. In order to call self image get section, I'm calling OS this image. Well, that's a wrapper. On Windows, okay, on Windows, it's these calls. First, you get the module handle, and you do this by passing a pointer to it, and that pointer needs to be a pointer to some memory that you know is in the module you want. And so one way to do that is if it's a static function, the static function's always built, and by module we mean DLL or exe, the executable binary files. The binary file that contains this function pointer is definitely the one I'm trying to get my hands on right now, right? Now, does that make sense? Since I built it statically, each one will have its own copy, so it's always going to be referring to its own like entry point for this function. So we know we're getting the address to the right module, or an address inside the right module. Then it gives us back the module for that address. And we can then say, okay, we're talking about something in my current process, so we're going to use the process handle together with the module handle to grab module info. So one thing you have to keep in mind is that the idea of a module is an operating system level thing and is not, there's no language for it in the C language. So there's no way for the C language to have like a, how do I want to put this? There's no way for me to say something like get current module that is parameterless to the kernel, because then the kernel will have to, I mean, the only way that would ever work out is the kernel would have to like examine the call stack, unwind to the caller, figure out who it was that was asking for the get the current module concept. So this is how it works on every operating system: is you get a handle to the image, and then you get the address range of that handle, of that image handle. But to get that handle first, you need to provide some kind of key to the module you're looking for. And once you've got it, it's just a matter of parsing it. You have to remember that it's in virtual layout. So usually when you parse a PE file, you're parsing it out, you load it out of a file from your hard drive, and it's in the file layout. But you know, when you look at the layout rules after the header, the layout of each section has this virtual layout mode. When you're loading an image, it's now in virtual layout, not in file layout. Right? You got to look at the virtual offsets and the virtual sizes instead of the file offsets at that point. Okay, so we're going to keep the PE header, but we're saying self image get section looks like this. I feel like what I want is some kind of I do feel like I want to abstract that out again. Like it feels wrong to have it like this. And the reason why this feels wrong, I think, is because this is code that it's just fairly large on its own, but like as a standalone function, it doesn't make sense to do anything but this. Like this would be a function that would always be called in one spot, and that's right here. It's just also weird because I'm going to implement several of these, one for each operating system. Like format, right? So there's like the ELF version is going to go onto the OS Linux header there, like preprocessor condition. And somehow it just feels like a lot of information is being stored here behind a compiler switch, which I always feel uncomfortable with. Like this is the information about how to do something. And what if I want to do it without having to comply with the rule that it has to be here, right? This is supposed to be a static dispatch to something that couldn't otherwise be done. But all of this is just data transformations, right? The only thing that's unusual is that which data transformation I want to do wants to get statically switched. So that's not weird. I would just have self-image get section called to each one of the very simple parsers. So I guess the point is maybe I want in the base layer the get section range putter. Why don't we just do it like this? I think this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something that would have this feeling. Except, do you want to force anyone who uses your base layer to automatically use? Okay. I think for the simplicity of the example, I'll just leave it like this. Something's off. I just don't know what the best. If what's off is like you can't actually control the scoping of things properly in text files. Eddie Bear asks, can't you use the image-based pseudo linker variable in place of the get module xw call? Maybe you can. I didn't know there was a symbol like that was evocable. I'm gonna put it on my to-do list since you just brought it up. This project needs text file, and then we need the to-do. That out. Okay, so image base anchor pseudo variable. That might be something else. Yeah, you can try. I might not have links enabled. I'm a little incompetent when you switch rules and stuff, but you give it a shot, and if it doesn't come through, then I'll try something else. Okay, let me see what you got here. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Nobody's upset about posting a link like that. That's for sure. All right. Let's experiment with that in a minute. I think the PE parser. Okay, I think the best thing I could do in terms of how to organize this. What is this file for? Let's delete this. This doesn't. I think I want it like this. All right, Eddie. That's one of the main things I need to figure out is what's it gonna look like to vet how many places where this works. If it's available in enough linkers that it's pretty much always there on Windows, like I pretty much only use. Then I think that's reliable enough. Um, get section image name return result. Actually, call this PE. One downside I think that I'm already detecting is that what I'm doing here gets me the size of the image, but the DOS header doesn't have that information. I don't. I don't know, but I don't really know the DOS header part because I just always skip to the call file part. Well, let me think. Maybe it would be better to assume. Let's just try something here. Say this is the old way of doing things and try a new way. What if I just don't know the size and I want to try to parse with that? Then what do we do? Extract DOS header. Can't check the size is safe, so we assume it's safe because we're assuming this is already an active image. DOS header, cough header. Cannot check the size. Okay, there's the cough header. Section table offset. Scan the section table. Can't check the size. But ultimately what's going to happen is section count will have to be greater than 0 for anything to actually happen. Hey, that works. Okay, so in Windows, we implement this image by just going image base and we just get it linked right in. That's really cool. No system call then. Awesome. Okay, I accept. This is the new way of doing things. It makes the parser faster if you don't do the size checks anyways. We're already saying we assume. Well, I am already saying that I think it's safe to assume this is validated because we're using it to inspect the image we've already got. Let's call this image get section. Mr. Forth p dot image get section dot h. Mr. Forth p dot image get section dot c. Cool. Alrighty. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I don't really need a type on the image base there. And as long as no one else declares it, it'll be fine. If someone else is declaring this ever, it would become necessary, like they would need to match, which would get annoying. Kind of surprising that there isn't one just already declared by the Windows header or something. But yeah, you would. It should be the case that wherever that symbol is, the type the type U8 can be placed in any address without the type rule becoming undefined. So it really what would happen in my understanding is whatever type I put here would be correct because the symbol position is going to be set correctly either way. The only part that's going to be a little strange is when I go to access it. If it were, say, like somehow the case that the image base was, I mean, the image base is also always going to be aligned to like a 4K, right? This is the image base. It's highly chunked how these get loaded in. So if this was going to be at like, 3 off of a multiple of 2 or something, right? There's going to be some really weird address. Then a U8 would still always be correct, but something like a 64-bit integer or even the DOS header could be wrong. But both factors there, the image base should always be heavily aligned, like a highly aligned number or address, and U8s should be able to go anywhere. Ooh, that's a good idea. The only tricky thing is it has to have the same name. Either way, but you might be right that this would solve the problem. Ooh, I've also been meaning to try that. So instead of taking the address of it, what if we use an unsized array? This makes image base a special kind of symbol because it is laid out like it is a block memory, like a U8 or a set of U8. but the name references the address of it, right? It decays into a pointer, the technical jargon for it. So even though this is an array type, it decays into a pointer type the moment you do something like this, and the pointer it gives you is the base of the array. That means you don't have to take the address of it. But if you were to try to say this is a pointer, you would actually end up in the wrong spot, because now you're reading the address out of that pointer. This is not an array decaying. This is an actual variable standing for a pointer. And so to reference it now means to go and read the variable, which isn't what we want. We don't care about what's there. We care about where it is. And this is a special way to do that, which I've been meaning to experiment with. So thanks for throwing that in there. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to do it. In fact, while we're doing that, let me go. We're just, this isn't quite C scripting, but I've been meaning. I'm just gonna jump to the other project real quick. I've been meaning to try this over here. So I've got these shaders that I manage as separate files, and I link them in as variables to the asset viewer. So if we go over here, the asset viewer has these text shaders and the sprite shaders as global variables that are external, and then a linking step puts them in, right? When I build the asset viewer, what I do is I run my little utility obj from raw, which packs each of these GLSL scripts into a data, like a global variable blob, like the data section of this object file, and then I can link them together. And so these stand for the contents of those text files, but to use them, I have to take their address, because it's like I said it's a char, but really it's the name that references, whose address is the first byte of the whole block of data. And so the thing I've been thinking is, what if, well, first of all, it's working. Stuff is off with it right now, but that's not the main focus. If I wanted to do this, would this work for the obj from raw stuff? That's the big question I have right now in my head. And it seems like it would based on the first experiment, but just to be sure. Nice. Okay, cool. Just a little bouncing around there. Back to C scripting. Code Void. I wrote this editor for Coder like gosh, it was over 10 years ago when I started it at this, and I designed it based on Emacs in a lot of ways. I was using Emacs when I started working on it. So the Emacs similarity is totally my exposure to. Yeah. Question: what's this music? I'm playing. You want to look up the name? I'm playing Spotify radio seated by this track. Katsu name, cousin is the artist. Type that into Spotify. This will be the first one that comes up, and that's what it is. But yes, part of the appeal for me. What am I working on? Well, today I'm working on I've got this project. Let me show you a little bit about what I do. So this is my website, mrforth.com, and you can read all about what I do here. But to give you the main idea, I do research projects, especially based on making immediately available new tools that kind of change the way I can deal with certain kinds of problems. I attempt to find new ways simply but effectively solve annoying problems, especially for people who work in small teams or who are uh, open to the possibility of changing how they work in out of the box ways, stuff like that. And you can support me, and if you do, there are certain perks. I'm not saying you should now, but what I'm working on today is this repository for C scripting, which is a thing I've been iterating on for maybe a month or so now, that is paying off a lot in a lot of different ways, but I haven't made this code public yet. This is for members only. We're still iterating on it, but I do a lot of the research out in the open anyways. And someday I'll probably try to distribute this with a small price tag, but members and supporters will be able to buy it off of the credits they get from their subscriptions. The other thing that I should say is if you go to my YouTube channel, I've described in great detail what the C scripting is all about. Like I went through this initial write-up on like a week or two ago, and I can link you that if you're interested in more about C scripting. But the very basic idea is it's a way to make it's a way to make C programming a lot more flexible without really changing the core of the language, right? It's still based on C, but it's this way of writing code where you bind in function information like a block of code here that works like a hook with some data that you want to put together into a organized data table. And that might sound very simple, but the number of things it can actually impact in terms of factorization of reusable code is proving to be a lot. So I keep going further and further with making the tooling around this better and better. Today, that's what I'm doing, working on cleaning up the code in the example repository. So speaking of which, my initial goal here was to go in and clean up the PE to the point where I think now I'm satisfied with that. That's a good cleanup. Let's commit that much. So that's a good. That's a pretty good step. Now, thinking about what's on my to-do list, is there anything else? Okay. I'm trying to think of where to go next. Um, well, some other. That's done. versions with um Okay, I know this was a short early stream, but I think that's about all I've got for today. Like I've said before, the C scripting stuff is kind of going to be a tiny little bit of iteration at a time as I feel my way through it. And it's still imperative that everything I do makes contact with reality as I'm doing a research project like this. So I think this is it for now. I want to get back into um, object files soon, but it doesn't feel appropriate right now because um, there's just so much going on. The other end of this project, the RPG stuff is popping off better and better, and it keeps on driving our idea how to apply this C scripting. So I want to follow that. Um, Trying to think. Yeah, it just feels like that's it for today on C scripting. I'll probably stop here, have an early lunch, and if I come back, which I feel like continuing stream today, I feel like being on. I haven't streamed back for a little bit. So when I make it back, if I do, um, I think I'll show you a little bit about what I've been doing on the RPG simulator side, and maybe try doing a round of iteration on that. There's a lot to catch up on, and I don't want to fall too far behind because I know at least a few people hanging out have been following the project for a while. So I'd like to not let everybody fall too far behind and make sure I can explain how things are working. I think that's what I'll do. Lunch break early, come back in an hour or two, and we'll bop over to the RPG simulator. See what's been. Uh, with that, I'm gonna wrap up for now. See you all in a little.